Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, where we ask questions and demand answers from each other. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
This week we're going to give you an update on... We're going to give you a general progress report on what we've been doing in season 2 of this podcast. It's probably 6 months in now, isn't it? It was like
probably,
after meaning.
Yeah.
So that's some app projects and some audio-visual projects and all the different things that we've been trying to do, ideas we've had, frustrations we've experienced. And this just sort of like link a bit back into the previous episode where I haven't done quite as much as I would have liked to of. See how I use the word of for have there.
This is a good moment for me to review my season 2 activities because I have relocated to the Croatian island of Brač, certainly for the next few months, potentially longer if people want to pay me to do work remotely. And so therefore I have an opportunity to review my season 2 activities and perhaps adapt them to my new lifestyle.
Excellent. All right, well, let's play some music in and then chat.
Get on with it.
So, Ivanka, the island of Brač, how far away is that from where they filmed all that Game of Thrones stuff?
Not far, but far enough. Apparently there's a catamaran type boat, not a ferry, that takes you from Dubrovnik to Brač, but a different village to ours, which takes a couple of hours.
All right, so you can go and see.
Maybe 20, I don't know. I've never been on the ferry thing, on the boat, but I've been to Dubrovnik many times.
Well, good. How's it going?
It's going well.
Yes.
Yes. So that was my bit of my. Unfortunately for Dubrovnik, whilst it's all very exciting that they have these Game of Thrones tours and Star Wars tours and shit,
Yeah.
it just fills the city with people that don't spend any money because they come off cruise ships,
Right.
and then they just fill the space.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know.
Why don't they spend any money? What?
I don't know.
What?
I think a lot. I think at some point, somebody in Croatia, or maybe it was in these specific cities, made a point of making about their tourism strategy about attracting cruise ships, but forgetting entirely that cruise ships tend to be like all inclusive. So
yeah, self-sufficient.
Why would you come off your boat and then go to lunch somewhere or buy a drink when? If you save up your hunger, you can go back to your cruise ship. You're heavily polluting a cruise ship and eat and drink to your heart's content or something like that. But yeah, Dubrovnik is very busy these days. I wouldn't go in high season if you paid me to go.
Okay.
Off season, no problem. It is very, very beautiful and, worth a visit in a sort of living museum type way. But... it's full of tourists. That's what I have to say on that. Okay. How are you, Michael?
I've got this. I just had a week of doing nothing. So we recorded. I think I realised one aspect of the contents of the last episode were. I think I was kind of approaching some burnout. I think I'm still not. The wolf's not fully away from the door, but when your sort of head starts to feel sort of like crushed in and your creativity disappears and you're just like can't see anything, not can't see anything, but like just that sort of head pressure. It's much less than it was a week ago, but still I could use another couple of weeks, to be quite honest. So I've just been I just bought myself a Nintendo.
It's the obvious way to recover from burnout.
Well, I just thought I'm just going to do absolutely nothing and just play, games for a week. So I just played this Zelda game, Breath of the Wild, where you wander around this open world kingdom and sort of wonder what the video game logic is at times. was going to walk into this person's house and apparently I can just sleep in their bed without even talking to them. What's that about? Or just like there's these monsters. Well, you can tell they're monsters because they're going, but then just minding their own business, just defending their little forts, and you're supposed to just go in and murder them. And I'm like, is this what is the morality of this game? And it's sort of realizing it's all right. If they're human, then they're okay, but don't kill them. But if they're not, then they're fair game. Okay, that seems all right, fine. And then its treatment of women is not sophisticated. Like that's very. No, it's been fun, like flying, like gliding around and like figuring out puzzles and just I sort of went out in the real world yesterday and just it sort of puts a different lens on it. And something that I like that does tie back into some of our conversations is this thing of the way it sort of frames commerce and sort of money is you're just sort of walking around and you sort of see mushrooms and you see these things that you can just sort of gather, or if you sort of fight monsters you sort of get stuff, monster parts and things, and then all of that sort of labor that you've put in can then be exchanged for cash. The first sort of merchant you meet, you can say, okay, well, I've got these animal bits and I've got these, I've cooked this nice hot pot, do you want to buy that for more money than I paid for the parts or whatever? And then I sort of walk through London and go, there's nothing in real life there's nothing just around that you can just sort of gather and then exchange. Like everything's locked in and it's just hard concrete walls and brick walls. And the only thing I could really think of that was analogous to this sort of like wandering, nomadic existence where you just sort of collect nice things that you find was like bike thieves. This idea of like nothing's like if something's not nailed down then someone will probably have it in London. But then maybe that's actually a valid human instinct because if it wasn't massively overpopulated and just closed off and owned and marked out, then that would kind of be a valid way to survive and exist. That we have to somehow turn off, and you have to sort of go into these special processes in order to be able to, make money. Which is why I think Sharon and I like this idea of, she does crochets and things, and then we set up a market stall and she sells stuff on the stall. Sort of feels a bit more in touch with a more traditional way of existing.
Yeah, we had in our clear out before moving, we had quite, because I've mentioned before the neighbourhood that I live in Brighton, people leave furniture outside and bits and bobs and you can, take them away. So, I mean, in terms of, we have many chairs and much furniture that has been thus gathered and upcycled. Right. But as we were packing, I had a box of treasures outside our house, and it was quite amusing watching because there was a few discussions with my small child going, "Mummy, I didn't say you could put this in the recycling." as I try and offload some nonsense that she's been given. But anyway, so I had this, but it's quite nice watching the kids on the way to school and back coming in to have a rummage. And yesterday I got myself a new book, and today I've got myself a little bag, and like one of them came back. So it's a nice way. Not only was it a nice way of exchanging stuff or giving stuff away for free, but also chatting to your neighbours and just generally just engaging a bit. So it's quite, because I sat outside. It was sort of like if I saw parents coming past with a pram and a small child, I'd be like, "Would you like to look at my box of treasures?" You never know what a small child will turn into a toy, is what I've learned. So
unfortunately, nobody wants anything, outside Brighton. Nobody wants anything used. They just want to go and buy it new from Argos. They want a new one in a plastic box. They don't want to touch something that anyone else has ever touched. Have we mentioned that thing about how phone screens have this carcinogenic? They use this carcinogenic chemical to clean them so there's no fingerprints on them. So all the people in the factories that are
yeah.
cleaning these phones so that it looks like no human hand has ever touched it, because that's what we expect from our shiny Apple product or shiny anything
I didn't know
product.
you did mention that, but you didn't mention it was a carcinogenic cleaning.
Yeah, it's
thing.
carcinogenic, and it's just so that we don't see a fingerprint on our phone.
Weird.
And imagine that anyone's ever come near it.
I am curious on that topic though to see, because I've got stuff here that I could do, like this freegling type activity. Yeah. I'm trying to work out how to infiltrate this little village society sufficiently to get to set up like a children's clothes swap or bring a toy swap or something, just to get this idea that because the only thing that currently happens is the people who, rather than much many of the plastic bottles and drinks cans, you can get money back if you take them back to the shop that they were bought from. So a lot of people who will leave bags of these stuff outside, and then the people who need money will then take them back and get the money for them. And so that's the closest behaviour I've noted to that sort of freegling type. Because I told you when we bought this house, it was full of furniture and stuff. So there's quite a lot of things that we've not thrown away, but we've just got them in the loft because we haven't thought of anything to make with them yet, but you never know.
Let me tell you about, so it was the EU, as of recording, it was the EU elections yesterday. And so I voted. I think it's pretty scandalous that you go to sort of BBC. I went to the iPlayer app to see what I could find about the candidates, basically. See, okay, well, they must have done like a roundup of here's everyone. Or just like looking, because basically Facebook told me, here's a thing, here's a website where you can go. And at least it's sort of linked into some Twitter accounts. But really, like the BBC was nothing but Farage and just nothing about the EU elections. And then my dad was complaining today that there's nothing about it on Radio 4 this morning.
No, it's like it didn't happen.
How are we, and I feel like this whole electoral process where you sort of leave it till the last minute, but then because the way our brains are trained for the internet, you don't expect there to be no information about these people that you're supposed to choose between. But there's very little information about it. It's hard to find, and then I realised, we should have gone to the hustings like earlier in the week or last week to actually kind of see who these people were. But you sort of turn up and it's like, I can imagine a lot of people like, well, the Brexit Party is the only one I've heard of, so I guess better the devil you know.
Yeah.
Like, I think we overestimate how much of a rational decision goes into this voting, because there's not, isn't the job of the press to inform us about all this stuff? And surely,
certainly the publicly funded press.
BBC homepage should be, here is a rundown and a profile of every person in every area, and we've interviewed them, and here's a video. And I just would expect that these days, but it's really just not there at all.
No, no, it's not. I was a bit confused with the. So I've had quite a pleasant week of not being constantly plugged into the UK news cycle and generally social media, because we've been unpacking, and due to some of the positive benefits of the climate breakdown is that it's been unseasonably rainy here, which means that my plants have grown enormously, as have my weeds. So there's been some garden to bring into order, and so I've had quite a week
media-free
week, because the only work we've been doing on the computer is being we're launching Restaurants Brighton Jobs. So which seems like a sensible add-on to Restaurants Brighton. So Nick and I have been working on that, and as our main work objective, and then the rest of the time being unpacking, moving things around. We brought some more recycled chairs with us. So we've brought 3 chairs. So then you've got to choose where you're going to put them. It's very exciting in our house with all our bin-dived furniture. And so it's been quite refreshing. But the bits I have seen have all been about tactical voting and how to stop the far right and milkshakes. And it's quite. And then somebody shared with me, my friend in Norway, who I usually do a proxy vote for him. He sent me a link to this article on Medium where somebody's done loads of investigating into Brexit party candidates. I'll share the link with you later. But it's like, it is an incredibly depressing read. It's like...
why is that? And why is that a Medium post and not
why isn't it
journalism that we're paying for with our tax money? Like, why isn't that what the BBC is doing? Why has it got to be some guy? Like, I assume guy.
It's kind of like, basically just the intro, from gay conversion therapy advocates to supporters of paedophilia legislation, from climate change deniers to rampant tax avoiders, from NHS abolitionists to besties of neo-Nazis, from fracking supporters to unabashed profiteers of chaos, is the summary of everything I found out about the Brexit Party MEP candidates. I mean, it's just a terrible horror story, frankly.
That's kind of the word of the week, isn't it? Like chaos profiteers, like chaos is a ladder. Anyway, so I will tell you what I ended up deciding, which
Tell me.
I was like, I think it has to be green.
Yes.
And the reason for that partly was like, basically, in Game of Thrones terms, I feel like the Green Party is seeming more and more like Jon Snow going, everybody in King's Landing stop squabbling, the army of death's coming. Like, they're coming down to kill us all, and if we don't do something about it, and it's like, I was like, okay, yeah, that's I think that's quite a good analogy, where it's all like, and everything else is like, well, who's going to stop Brexit? Who's going to be the biggest? You know, it's all political and sort of like pretty empty. And and to me, it was like between probably the Liberal Democrats, just because they're actually saying, no, we're just going to not do Brexit. We're not going to have a people's vote. We're just, I think that's what they were saying. I feel horribly ill-informed. But that green, like, environmental concern is a set of values that I can be pretty sure that I know that makes sense. That's something that... And then not doing Brexit is a means to an end. So it's not like as soon as you sort of cancel Brexit, like everything... Like, because the thing is, it gets cancelled or it happens. We've still got problems to solve. And I would rather just look past the current bullshit. Like, look where the ball is going to be rather than where it is now. And I think... So I was just thinking, like, what's that Steve Jobs quote? Like, you got to kind of aim for where the ball's going to be, not where the ball is now, but or you'll just miss it. So I thought, well, I guess the only people I can see, it feels suddenly like the Green Party have for years been those people, and like, here's where it's going. And then also from a lot of our conversations, and Kate Raworth and all these all this economics learning I've been doing recently, it's like sustainability and environmental awareness or whatever is not a single issue party. No. It affects everything, and if you have sustainability as a mindset, then there's nothing that doesn't affect. And so I thought, yeah, okay, well, I guess I'm voting green, because I can't. There's a qualitative difference between the sort of squabbles of people. And there are other sort of, and then I did see, like, the first one was like Animal Rights Party. I'm like, come on. So I mean, that's where I would have used to probably have put the Green Party sort of quite close to those in my mind. But now I'm like, okay, no, let's face it. Like, this is the biggest issue facing us all. So who are the people that have been talking about this? Let's go for these fuckers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
see what happens.
We went to dinner with some good friends last night. These are my old family friends, and that we were talking about who they're going to vote for in the EU elections. And I was like, is there a Green candidate? And they're like, and they've lived many years in Germany. They're like, nah, the Greens don't really feature. There's one minister they were referring to who had herself photographed with, like, all very nicely dressed with gloves on, picking up rubbish. So so I think my answer to any political conversation in this part of the world where things are very, very right or very left and there's no middle ground whatsoever is that's all very interesting, people, but there's a climate crisis, so that's become my new mantra.
Well, there was a George Osborne piece which I found by someone from the Liberal Democrats thanking George Osborne. I think it was George Osborne in the Independent or something. But it kind of went through like why most of it's bullshit and sort of came out saying, well, the Liberal Democrats are going to seem like the people to vote for, but then didn't mention the Greens at all in that, and I was like, you know what? I think that's wrong. And obviously, I'm not doing any tactical voting bullshit. I think
I think that's shit.
I think if we're thinking like that, we're just going to fuck ourselves over.
I think now, listening to what you're saying, I think my next job after this recording is to cancel my Labour Party membership and join the Green Party. It's just like it's time to stop now. I'm very disappointed that. I don't have it in me to, help fix the Labour Party. And I think that, in Brighton, the Labour and the Green candidates have agreed to work together because the Labour Party has the majority on the local council, but only by one, I think. Right. So it's a Labour leader, but they've come to an agreement on 5 policy items, including sort of housing, climate crisis, and I don't know what the others are, to be honest with you, because they're the 2 things that face Brighton. But they've agreed to collaborate, cooperate, all those sorts of words. So rather than playing political shenanigans with each other, which is what's become incredibly boring to me, this sort of like chess playing bullshit, when actually there's a climate collapse. So let's crack on and sort it out. The army of the dead are coming.
I'm very disappointed with the reaction to Game of Thrones. And I'm not going to spoil it, but a lot of people I respect are whinging about it. And I'm like, come on. Like, it's just, I know it doesn't necessarily feel good, but guys, that's the story. And there was some shit that we saw on screen that how can you be whinging after they put that stuff on screen? And that's all I'll say, like, spoiler free, but like, how can you be whinging about something that just did that? You were like, I've never felt like sick to my stomach for like 80 minutes of TV before.
Wow.
So how you can be whinging about, oh, well, they kind of rushed some of the plot threads. It's like, fucking, come on. You do better. It was very much the man in the arena situation going on there, right? Like, really, come on. Like, and you just have you not even watched it behind the scenes? Like, and you're saying that, it's like, come on. Look, they were literally in the mud every night for like 50 nights. Like, these actors are going through hell to do this. Like, they could just be on some sitcom, but they're like actually in the mud with this heavy stuff on, and it's cold, and it's like, give them a break. Like, why are you being such twats about this? Anyway, so that's all we'll say about that. The innovations they come up with, how they could have piles of bodies, because they learnt one time, like, actually they have these like latex moulded like corpse piles that are sort of hollow and that then painted, but so that it's easy to move them around because there were so many piles of corpses. Like, anyway, Game of Thrones, come on, guys. Jesus Christ, like, what do you want? What do you want from these people? Right, where are we up to?
Where we're
in saving the world?
People should be able to see your face now. Where are you?
Pink face. I got a bit of sunburn yesterday. You just don't. Summer always catches you by surprise in London. It was like 21, 22, and I just walked around for a couple of hours and just
burnt.
thought it was fine, and then I looked in the mirror. I was like, oh no, bit of sunburn.
That's not going to help your
red
wrinkles.
face, and also, excellent ContraPoints video, by the way, came out yesterday. Beauty was the title. And I watched it in the day and then just ended up rewatching the whole. It was really easy to rewatch the whole thing with Sharon later on. So she was like, because she's just had a facial feminization surgery.
Oh.
Which is like shaving off a bit of bone from the jaw, like taking cartilage out the nose, reducing the forehead, reducing the Adam's apple, all this kind of stuff. And it was just an episode on. She was like, oh, why did she do it? I was like, it's really complicated. This is someone that knows that societal constructs of beauty and patriarchy, but I just want to be beautiful, but I don't want to look like a woman. I just don't want to look like a man. All this, and it's so complicated. I was just like, well, let's just watch this bit, and it's like, just watch the whole thing. It's just really, it's so well put together, and some music that I'm enjoying the work of Sophie. The artist, all caps, a couple of tracks. Vise is strangely compelling, and this face shopping track I would recommend having listened to it. It's nuts in a good way. But anyway, what were we saying?
Where are we up to? We're saving the world.
Yeah.
I'm now in Croatia, right, so that's nice. And there's lots of insects in my garden, so that's also reassuring. And I've got tangerines on my trees, which is.
But this is not
really
about how
exciting.
you're saving the world. Also, this reminds me of another thing, which is we got those seed bombs, but they're really we look at the garden. It's been a few weeks now,
yeah.
And you look down, it's like the weeds are so much bigger than anything that's coming out of those little cardboard grenades. And I don't really see why they were in little grenades, because it doesn't seem to aid anything. Why don't we just tip them out into the soil? They're slightly ugly as well. So you've got these slightly feeble growth from the things we've planted. Meanwhile, the weeds are just like,
have you watered them?
We're here, we're big, we're ready. So we'll see how it goes.
It's not my fault that your seed bombs haven't worked.
You're the one that recommended them.
Well, I just said get some bee seeds, bee-friendly flowers, I said.
You said seed bombs.
Oh, did I?
How else?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I said seed bombs. I thought they were a good thing. I thought they'd be easy.
Apparently they're losing the battle to the weeds in our garden.
No.
How are we saving the world?
Pull up some weeds, man.
Pulled up some weeds.
The weeds are good for the bees as well. Anyway, are
Yeah,
they
but I'm
pretty
not sure
weeds?
which of weeds. Some of them might be not weeds, and it's not quite clear yet. Maybe some of it isn't weeds, but I don't know. It seems like most of it's
my
weeds.
approach is if it looks pretty, keep it.
Yeah.
So
good policy.
it's like it's all about these days. It's all about not. Oh, that's what happened on our trip. So we drove across Europe in a van. My husband was on his motorcycle, so in a separate vehicle, riding his motorcycle across Europe. But we would meet up for coffees and things. And in Austria, we stopped at one service station lay-by thing with no shops or anything, just a place to stop and have picnics. And it was full of dandelion flowers. And for the first time ever live in the world, I saw a bee with the big pollen bags on its legs. What?
Nice.
Why are you laughing? I've never seen
a
it.
bee covered in pollen bags.
Because I've seen
What's not funny about that? Weirdos.
I've seen a picture of it on interwebs, but I was like, oh, look. So we did a little science and nature lesson. Look, because she wants to pick all the dandelions. I was like, no, we must leave them for the bees. So it was exciting. That's still not telling you how we're saving the world. So this is my plan. This is my plan, right? Number 1, I'm going to make my app that records how vegan I am.
Okay.
Which obviously, to any real vegan, that question is just an abhorrence. However,
well, there's this problem. I don't like to be identified as a vegan, just in case someone puts me in. Are you vegans? You've got a brand problem.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, I'm going to make my How Vegan Are We app, which might turn out to be just, a set of fridge magnets to start with, or a paper prototype, but we'll see. Then I went for my first run this morning because we've been busy unpacking and weeding and stuff, and I collected a whole carrier bag of rubbish. Because first I started picking up a few little bits of plastic, and then I found a plastic bag, and then I started putting the bits of plastic, and I found a bit of polystyrene. So anyway, I collected lots of rubbish this morning. I was going to photograph it and put it on the internet for everyone to admire, but then I thought, do you know what? I'm going to put it in the bin instead. So there's my rubbish pickup, which I'm also hoping I might go to the local council and try and work out, how does a tourist village, a village that makes most of its income from tourism, how do you weave cleaning your beaches into that as a positive tourist message activity? If you see, because so people are on their holidays.
Yeah.
And so, for example, let's say I pick Saturday morning or Sunday morning, because in Brighton there's a beach cleanup group called Dean's Beach Cleanup, I think. And they often on a Saturday morning, and it's year round, do beach cleanups. They don't necessarily do Brighton Central Beach, because I think that A, gets more attention anyway, and B, I don't know why they don't, but they tend to do the smaller beaches just to the side. I think it might be easier to organise and coordinate. But anyway, so I was trying to work out because I'm very happy to be the mad lady who goes, that mad lady that's moved here from England, who picks up rubbish. I'm cool with that, but I'd like to have slightly more reach than that. So I'd like to get some more mad ladies joining in, or mad people. So I was thinking about how to, because the mayor's quite friendly and sort of they're independent. The mayor of the village is a party independent, so I could go for a chat with him and his gang, and see what he says. And the brand of the village is bicycle friendly, so that's their tourism tagline. So it's not a big stretch if you're attracting people who are outdoorsy and cycly to say, we also have a Saturday morning beach plastic pickup, or we encourage people, because you do sit on the beach and watch people, peel their sweets and let the paper flutter in the wind. And I just wonder how, could I get some paper rubbish bags printed that I could give out to people? Could I, how do you do a thing that doesn't basically balance out, let's clean our beaches, with the beaches aren't that dirty in the first place, because why would you want to come in here on holiday because the sea is beautiful and clean, but let's take our rubbish off the beach, please, and other people's if they've left it behind, or it's washed up or whatever. So that's my current dilemma, because one thing I have from reading all these how do we save the world things, I think local community is a major factor in how we do that. So becoming more interreliant, sharing. I've said it before, but I think helping, being the best I can be in my local community, I think is worth the bother.
On Team Human as well, you hear, stories of these things that start up as local things, and then you've talked about things like that as well.
So, and then I was thinking that, because as I was walking back this morning, I was like, actually, I could easily start doing the Done Good app again. I just need to maybe create a shortcut for it on my phone, so I do it.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's reminders that are missing at the moment. I think we need to just be reminded of our scores every week, because it's just easy. It's the first thing that gets forgotten about, really.
Yeah.
And I'm not even asking you on the podcast. I've not been keeping mine up, so
no, I haven't done.
Forgotten.
Mine.
It's gone. We need to gamify it properly.
Yeah.
I've got a platinum gym membership, and that's 2 years. I'm a platinum member.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It just means I've got the platinum status, and then I'll have the diamond status next year.
You get a special headband. Like a
all we have to do is just say, look, 3 more months at this level,
and you're platinum.
This arbitrary thing icon on your profile. I think that's quite effective.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But I have literally no time to work on any of that.
I was speaking to one of my academic friends recently, and we got together about 6 weeks ago, and then we talked about once I was here, because she reckoned after May she'd have time. She's come up with some sort of working model for integrating sustainability into design. That's as much as I know. But I said I'd help her with making a website and some, sort of work on that with her, which means that I could then apply, in terms of like magnifying influence or reach. That seems to me to be, if there's a model for doing design work that helps sustainability, and I can help get that out there, then I think that's an important factor in saving the world.
Getting a TED talk. But going back to your vegan
TED talk.
Going back to your vegan app, I think it's quite interesting to talk about, because you mentioned your sort of how you were going to approach it.
Yeah.
I think that's quite interesting to hear about.
I'm not that keen on recording the details of what I've eaten. I find it a bit, I lose interest very quickly, like from a calorie counting point of view. And I was thinking that what I could do as a sort of paper prototype of it is create something with my daughter that we have on the fridge. So, after meals we can mark and I think there's 3 main classifications, which is vegan, vegetarian and meat. And I think to start with, those would be the 3. So, and then you could possibly start doing percentages, like, if you eat meat every day, but are just using 3 lardons to flavour something, how much of a meat eater are you really? But I think that's the second tier. So if you could, I think, and then we could have a little chart on the fridge, and because she's 4, she's very into colouring in and making things, and we could do some buttons or something that's different colours, and just see how that evolves.
I think that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah, and then
and then, I mean, you can always just take pictures of it as well, and then you've got this record of it
that
you
can
potentially import into something more sophisticated in future. Something I did see the other day, I found this platform called Coda, Coda.io, where you sort of make these documents that behave like apps that I thought might be quite a good fit for that. I was telling you about it before, but this is on the podcast. I think it's because the way people that don't program but need to work, like, often you see them programming through Excel, and kind of like it's like you are programming, but in this slightly awkward way through massively complex Excel like formulas and scripts and things like that. And actually, this would be a lot easier to do if you just sort of embraced that you're coding, rather than trying to sort of like double click on that little box and type it into this horrible little row where you can't really read it anymore. So I'm quite interested in this platform, which is, it's sort of like lets you make a document, and then there are spreadsheets within that, but then that you can sort of reference the data in different ways. And if you make a Gantt chart that connects to a timeline thing, you can drag the Gantt chart timeline, and it will kind of like update the Excel, the sort of the table earlier and things like that. We're not being paid to talk about this, but I just thought that would be quite an interesting platform for you to maybe try prototyping something on.
I mean, I had thought about simply starting it off as a spreadsheet, but actually I think I'm more likely to fill it in if it's like on the fridge or something to start with, because that's the sort of a close.
Yeah, I think yours
and then but also, isn't this what you're talking about? Isn't that similar to whatever David Siegel's doing at the moment? Because wasn't he doing something with make an app through? Like it. I haven't looked at it.
I don't like this making software without code idea. I think it's easier to write. I just don't know why there's this. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. Sorry, David. I haven't looked at it yet. But I do have a bit of I'm like, what's wrong with a bit of code? Just make the writing of the code really clear.
Yeah.
I'm sure David has done something clever with the idea.
I don't know. I agree with you to quite a big degree, actually, because I mean it's been a long time since I've really done proper coding of any description, but I when I started making web pages, you had to write your own, there were no apps to do anything clever, so you just had to write your own HTML. And even now, even if you look at the back of a WordPress page, as soon as a thing has edited it, there are bits in there that you're like, why do you need that? What is that doing in there? And then you end up just going in and like cleaning out stuff that doesn't really have. So I get what you're saying, and there is beauty in really tidy, well written code. But I mean, for prototyping, getting something moving quickly, I don't know.
So it's that barrier to entry of like the big problem with to write neat code often implies that you've got to do a lot more. Setting up an environment and like making build tools and getting all that stuff working so that you can just open this one text document and like type in 3 lines and it achieves more than, hundreds of lines in some other thing. Yeah, I think you sort of pay with the environment. So there's these online platforms where that's sort of done for you, where you can sort of try things, but then you've got different problems because how are you going to put it on your phone and all this kind of thing. But this platform Coda it's sort of coming from documents and spreadsheets. So I don't know what Dave's doing, but I'll have to have a look at it just to see if he's onto something. I'm sure he's got something there.
It is David, so one has to have some hope.
Yes.
As I was mentioning to you earlier, at nursery, before we left, she'd done this whole healthy eating conversation. So she's into asking me about her meal structure. Mummy, what's the most healthy thing you could eat? So we had this conversation about how you can eat as many vegetables as you like, but everything else you have to eat in moderation. And what about ice cream? Because we've now got to do that thing, both for ourselves and for her, because we drink alcohol. What we don't want to turn into is those weird expats who sort of go and live somewhere and then drink as though they're on holiday and then suddenly increase their alcohol consumption. Do you know what I mean? So we've got to make sure we don't pretend we're on a sort of party bus. Not that that's how we operate, but you know what I mean? Like, and then for her, it's a lot of, an ice cream is a treat when you're having a day out, but just because you're in a holiday place doesn't mean that you can now have an ice cream every single day. So there's there's those conversations to be had as well. So maybe I can add another colour for, just bad for you.
Well, if you want a recommendation for an especially chalky vegan ice cream, I have forgotten what it's called. We're nearly at the end, so maybe I should talk about me a bit.
Oh, yeah, you can talk about you now, Michael. Michael, what are you doing in your Save the World approach?
Look, we I think I was framing it as self-actualization, and one of your main sort of responses was, but this is allowing you the freedom to do things that you wouldn't be able to do if you weren't getting paid this money. Like you're buying your ability to work on this stuff. And the trouble is, like, you don't get something for nothing, and at this point it really is stopping me. It's taking the time away that it's just meaning that I can't work on things that I want to work on. But like I watched this Tim Ferriss talk, which is where I came across this Coda thing, about fear setting, which is where you
go on.
Yeah, so instead of like let's imagine the thing, let's actually like articulate the worst case scenarios in this framework, which so he's got I'll kind of gloss like skim over it, but you sort of define the things that you're worried about that will be the results of making a decision, and how much of an impact that would be, from 1 of no impact to 10 like life ending impact. Then you think about like what would you do to prevent each of those things happening, and then you think about what would you do if those things did happen to repair them. Like, what if other people less clever than you got through this, and then like what are the benefits of success, and then what is the cost of inaction? Like if you don't do anything, like what's going to happen, because that's a thing too. So I went through it, and so the question was like, what if I stop doing contract work? Was my like, what would happen if I just said no to any more contracts like this? Tried to get my own apps kind of making enough money to kind of cover. I've got my costs down to, if I could just do a little bit more work on these apps to get them paying the bills, which wouldn't be huge. Wouldn't be a huge, like a 10x number of sales. And considering at the moment I'm doing zero marketing, zero work to improve these apps for the last 2 or 3, 4 years, they're looking pretty kind of old, but they're still bringing in like a bit of cash every month. Kind of went through that to think like that's my goal here. I want to stop having to do contract work, because I have not been able to get. I mean, I've been making incremental process. The other way people say to do this stuff is to do incremental progress every day. Just make sure you spend an hour on it every day. So maybe that's what the regime I'll start from next week. Make sure I spend an hour on my projects every day. And then that may make me feel like things are moving forward a bit more than they do at the moment. But I spent a year with enough freedom to think about, like, trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do? And we've been over it on the podcast, but like, I was like, where can I use my skills to try and save change, do something that might, move the needle a little bit on the problems, on something meaningful. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what that thing was. And in the end, and after kind of doing that conference and talking to loads of people there and talking to you every week and kind of looking at all the different things, I did land on this. Okay, let's. I think it is going to be more a media type thing than an explanation / sort of like conversation starting thing than necessarily some app that solves some particular problem. So I found that thing, and then that immediately. I did the first one, and then that immediately turned into, okay, well, I found someone else who's got a very clever idea that is not remotely comprehensible to anyone normal. And I've actually like written my script that's like actually explains it. But it's really so drawn out. I don't know if I could have sped up that comprehension process on that thing. But now I've got a lot of production work to do that really is just like, I just need couple of weeks of just head down to just get this done, which is why it sort of feels so I'm feeling so sharply that I've not got any time to do this. And meanwhile, Dungard hasn't had any love for months. And then, I was even thinking like, we talked about like in terms of musical value or just like artistic value that I could offer. Like there's this sort of grumpy guy, this musician friend of a guy that works here. He comes in and he goes, and he had some other thing, but then he was like, oh yeah, my one of my friends just killed herself, like leaving a 7-year-old child. I'm like, okay, that's abrupt, and then I was like, yeah, well, I mean, my mum did that, leaving 4 kids, like under the age of 5. So I kind of know what that kid's got in store a little bit, depending on what happens. Because he was saying, I feel like I've got to do something. It's like, and I thought, like, even if just on my YouTube channel I could talk about like, well, what I could help those people that's happened to. I could like give them some of my learnings and understandings about what's happened to. I could just like, even if I just had enough time to do a video a week or a month on that, I think I could actually like help a lot of people. And so at the moment, I'm like, after a year or at least a year or two of trying to figure out where I could add value, I've kind of figured that out now. And it really is, it just really feels like it's the, I'm sort of like trapped in this situation where it's tempting to just keep earning the money. But then I just feel like some of this stuff is time sensitive as well. I feel like every week we lose on like getting this, this carrot coin idea out there.
It's time.
We've got this 11 years now. It's like there is a time limit on this stuff. And so the short answer is frustration that I haven't got time to do the things that I know I want to do now.
If that's the starting from the what if I said no to contract work I mean, we talked about the fact that I've learned quite a lot about pay-per-click online advertising.
Yeah.
So, we could do that for your apps and see what that does. And it's very easy to just set a small budget. I think what we could also do is, because, I can't record this, it would be nice if the podcast at least paid for its hosting, do you know what I mean? So, maybe it's time to put a bit more energy and effort into sort of the Patreon on this. And so that we get something that is... I maybe write about some of the things like the Done Good app and how we're developing it. Because we could also do... I think between the two of us as well, we could provide a different type of consultancy that just is let's have a look at your app for you, both from a technical point of view and interaction point of view, and make just as a little package that then so it's not like a
2-day workshop type thing,
or
exactly, like whatever. I like those little ones because it's like here's a little kind of
because it's there's a lot. I think. I mean, we between us, we know a lot about this, particularly about how to get people to use apps and what makes a good app and all that kind of stuff. And websites.
It's quite painful to be sitting here kind of like having a good idea of it, but not being able to exercise that on something we've made.
But then also with some of these other, like having these other... there's quite a few people out there with good app ideas for helping change the world, but then they might be missing something in execution. So anyway, we're not short of ideas. What we need is to make sure we cover our living expenses so that we can because it's not neither of us have any. We've worked out how many freedom coins we need and we've tried to make it as few as possible, and so what we need now is just to cover that off with us so that we can do more things.
And I think like just a bit of marketing, bit of ads on those apps, like if we can get it to a more than net, like a net positive, then surely that's good, right? I can taste it. But I've got my I did my little fear setting things. Like, what if I stop doing contract? It's like, I'll run out of money and start having to borrow again and ultimately have to go back to contracting. I'll fail to make enough money doing any of my other activities and will lose my sense of worth because I'm not in situations where I am an expert. My skills will get rusty and then I won't be able to return to contracting at a later date, even if I want to. My fallback plan will disappear. I won't be able to afford the gym anymore and will get fat and gross. I will spread myself too thin and end up with too many projects, and I'll end up working alone all the time. So these are the things that I need to prevent.
Blimey.
Fear setting.
But I don't think it's any different from any of us. I freaked out. When we came here last autumn, and basically I was going to not work at all, and I just couldn't cope with the idea of not. I was like, I ended up freaking out after 3 or 4 weeks, going, Nick, I don't know who I am if I'm not. So
it's weird.
But I feel much better now. A year later, I think it just takes a bit of time to filter into your brain, and then occasionally dipping in and doing a 6-week contract that is very time fixed, absolutely helps me reaffirm to myself that I do know what I'm doing. And
but it's hard because you get such a quick dopamine hit just going into those situations. It's like, I am so experienced. I know what I'm doing. And then you kind of come back to like hacking away at something that you maybe still have a lot to learn about, but that has meaning in it. Maybe it's not good, and maybe it's not, and you don't know, you haven't got like a clear idea of what you need to be doing every day. It's like, it is rough, but maybe after a while you get the hang of it.
I mean, I've even started playing much more with Sketch as an app, and I've even come up, done a logo for somebody recently, or that I was quite pleased with. But it's that kind of, it's just a brand extension. So I was working from something they already had, but still, it's just like nice to be able to challenge your skills a bit quite safely. Just because you're afraid, or you voice it or you pinpoint it as a fear, doesn't mean you can't cope with it. It's like, that the biggest thing Nick and I learned on that motorcycle trip was literally listing out all the things, like every time you were to encounter the next challenge, we would list out all these things that could go wrong. And then kind of discuss contingency plans, and then you could enter the situation confidently. And I also think the other thing I learned was that everybody has their own level of sort of fear and risk discomfort. So there's always going to be somebody more adventurous than you or braver than you in some regard. Like, so going off on a motorcycle trip, for many people, that is something they would never consider doing in terms of leaping out of their comfort zone. But we then met people who were cycling around the world all on their own on $5 a day. And like, we bumped into this guy in the middle of a desert in Bolivia. We're like, how are you even alive? Well, how are you carrying enough water? Because we can't carry enough water. You know what I mean? So people like, I think a lot of this sort of moving forward and changing things is about sort of going, right, this is as far as I'm willing to take a risk. And I think as you realise that you can, then your risk profile gets bigger. You're then braver. You're like, actually, I coped with that. Now I can go another one.
Do you know, I did this exercise, and I sort of came out of it going, oh, that's pointless. But now I'm looking back at it, I'm like, oh, this is actually really good, isn't it? Like, I've got a list of things. I just have to listen to Sharon when she says that's not important. Make sure that I have enough money saved and keep the corporation tax aside, and make sure that a focus of a percentage of my focus is on revenue generation. Make sure, like, find out all the prices of things so I can set money aside, set time aside to help other people through teaching, and find places to give value. And like, that could be YouTube, because you can find that expertise feeling in other ways. I don't know about this rusty skills, but I'm going to be keeping my skills going up.
I think rusty skills is a distraction.
You think so?
Yeah.
It's one of my biggest ones.
That you're afraid of?
It's such a... Yeah, it's like such a... It always feels like if you don't keep... I don't want to be one of these old contractors that only knows PHP, you know? It's like... I kind of want to stay on top of it, but...
But I think you will, because you'll do something and it'll frustrate you, and then you'll learn something to get you out of that hole. I mean, it's not like... the kinds of projects you're going to do are going to be nothing like what you would do contract work for. There might be a different scale, but, you know, if Happiness App becomes massive, the scale would be no different either. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the only thing that contracting has the potential to give you in terms of challenges that that this model doesn't is scale. I think, and an insistence on new business models. Sounds like my child and husband are home, even though they were supposed to be going down the beach.
Okay, so that's where we are, listeners. That was a status report, I think. I don't know.
We don't know what it was.
Preambling. We don't know what it was. Well, this is what happens when we need to like sort out.
We need to get more professional on our podcast.
But you know, it's ramble chat. It's a ramble chat. Let's have a ramble chat. What this is about.
That's one of my favourite jingles from Matey's Adam Buxton's podcast.
It is a good one.
Anyway, go on.
It is a good one.
So yes, this is us.
Yeah, it's just us. That's all I was going to say. Yeah, like the vision. So for me, like the vision of where our money would be coming from is app revenue and Patreon support / YouTube sort of stuff. I need to get that Patreon somewhere. I think that's the future that I would like. And it's not clear immediately. It's a bit of a chicken. I mean, I think my YouTube is my music YouTube has kind of is gathering momentum, or kind of. It had a spike and like almost enough that maybe I could start getting a nudge, but I haven't managed to get any Patreon support. But it's like, I think that's the vision. Patreon, bit more app revenue.
Cool.
Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com. Subscribe if you haven't already. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
Find me at michaelforestmusic.com, and that links through to other things. Instagram. YouTube. And you can send us an email or tweet us and say what you like about the podcast if you like it. And of course, tell your friends. Anything else?
If you could write a few reviews and ratings. If you're in your app now that you're listening to the podcast on now, go in and find somewhere where it says like or stars or love or something like that. Do those buttons, and then more people will be told about us by the algorithms.
You know what we should do? So here's a mission for people. Well, here's a job for people. Like, we're too close to this. How would you market our podcast?
Oh, interesting.
Like, what would you tell people our podcast is? Because I think we're too close to it and we don't know. And I sort of do think back to David Siegel's review, and maybe we should just take that review and like market it, like plug it into AdWords and say, look, this is what our podcast is.
That's true.
And we kind of, if you've got some thoughts about like what just send us an email. Just help us figure out how to tell people what it is. Yeah. Maybe you can coin an intro that sticks.
Wow.
Let's make an intro that sticks.
Let's make an intro that sticks.
Beyond that, that's hello@grandpodcast.com. You can email us and we will both see it. So, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.